And welcome on into the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. We both have a smirk and are laughing, George, just because living in Colts world truly does not even feel like we are living in the real world here. We asked before training camp started, let's have a drama-free training camp. And George, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see right here, days without drama. I put one being a little generous Saturday before hell hit the fan. So you know what we got to do, George? We got to circle it, cross it out, and go back to zero. That's where we are because last night, Saturday night, that is, Jonathan Taylor has officially requested a trade away from the Colts. So that's going to be where this pod is. Obviously, unfortunately, Saturday practice will get overlooked. We'll get to that probably on Monday's pod, but this is Jonathan Taylor right now all the time. This is basically the unofficial Jonathan Taylor podcast. Let me say this, George. Jonathan Taylor requested a trade. I don't think the Colts should trade him, nor will they trade him. He means too much for Anthony Richardson's development this year in 2023 to just give him away. And the other thing is, I just don't think that there's actually a legitimate offer that's going to come in where the Colts are like, that is worth it. Like, he is a top 3 running back in the NFL so far through the first 3 years of his career, maybe top 5. Either way, he is one of the best at his position. If you were going to trade him, you have to get some sort of significant capital back, either in player form or most likely in draft capital form. I don't think anyone's giving up a first-round pick with how running backs are being devalued. So if you're not going to get any good value, have him play out this season, franchise tag him next season, and bare minimum, have him be on the team in 2023 and 2024. That's where I see this going. I don't think it's going to get much prettier. I think it's going to get probably uglier. But at the end of the day, even though JT's officially requested a trade, I would be shocked. I'm going to guarantee right now in the pod, George, he'll be a Colt in 2023 and 2024. That is my reaction. George, your reaction to the official news, he has requested a trade.
Yeah, well, it's the only card he has to play, so I'm not shocked that he's requested the trade because again, I mean, we've been talking pretty much certainly all of training camp about how little leverage he has and the marketplace around the NFL right now being so poor for running backs. But I agree with you. I don't know where that's going to come from. Some of the Colts going to have to decide, do they want an unhappy running back on their hands? Do they want to accept something not that no one's going to look at as fair value in return for a trade? To kind of move on and I guess fix the locker room or whatever you want to say. Although I don't think that would actually happen because I can't imagine anyone in the locker room is going to be happy if Jonathan Taylor's gone for a 5th round pick or whatever it is that you're going to be able to extract from somebody there. And the other thing is I don't know how this standoff ends because franchising him next year is not going to help the situation. They are not talking about an extension. They've been pretty clear they're not going to do that till at least the end of this year. Maybe he comes through this season and is back in the form that we've seen him for most of his career. And at the end of the year, they're able to work something out. That's the only way I think there's a happy ending to this. I don't know. To me, this is one of those standoffs that at this point, it's really hard to see what the resolution is because both sides are dug in. The relationship, obviously, between them is pretty poor. I didn't see Taylor get off the bus yesterday, but a couple of the other guys did. And it said his head was down and he was just heading back, like he's looked for most of practice, just dejected. And I think that's understandable too, given where he's at. Jim Irsay has been pointing to the great relationship the Colts have with past players, which is absolutely true, but it's not relevant to the situation with Jonathan Taylor right now today. And obviously that relationship is not great. Again, it's hard for me to see where the resolution comes from here because they're not going to give him a contract extension. And Irsay came out last night and said they're not going to trade him. And that to me is where none of this adds up right now. They said, wait, we need to see more. We're not going to negotiate on the extension until at least the end of the year. Then at the same time, they say, but we're not going to trade you. And then you've got Irsay saying, during his scrum with the media that Quentin Nelson and Jonathan Taylor are the potential Hall of Famers on this team. So none of those things actually seem to marry together in any coherent way.
No, they do not. And there's a million different ways we can go with this, which is so frustrating. But this is what I'll say. I think you made I saw this a lot on Twitter on Saturday night, and it's a fair point, right? If the Colts franchise tag Jonathan Taylor next year, it's not going to make the situation any better. I 100% agree with that. But at the same time, we've talked about the running back devaluing and the fact that they have no leverage. That's part of the reason why I feel so confident JT's not going anywhere in 2023 and 2024. He has no, I don't know what he can do. This is the only thing he can do is request a trade, bring attention to his situation. But at the end of the day, he's not going to sit out 2023. That doesn't no good unless he somehow is able to stay on PUP all year long and prolong this injury or somehow, figure out a way where he could sit out the year and also not lose a season. Because that's the thing. He sits out the season. His contract just gets pushed to next year. So sitting out doesn't accomplish anything. And even if he has a huge year in 2023, the Colts just, for whatever reason, still say, oh, we don't want to give you a long-term deal, but we want you back in 2024. We just saw the Giants and Saquon Barkley had that exact situation where Saquon Barkley was on the record on a podcast 2 weeks before the franchise extension deadline day saying he might sit out for the Giants if he doesn't get an extension. Well, guess what, George? 3 days into training camp, he revised his 1-year deal, is basically getting $1 million more than the franchise tag and is playing in 2023 and is at training camp and has not said a word. So we've talked with this on previous pods this week. Money cures all. So whether JT gets an extension before this season, obviously very unlikely, but let's just say in the miracle stance that happens, he gets what he wants. He'll be fine going forward if he gets an extension. If he gets an extension after 2023, all will be well. The issue for him in running backs is he can demand a trade if the Colts are truly dug in. And Irsay is telling the truth that he is not trading Jonathan Taylor. He's not trading Jonathan Taylor now, nor in October at the trade deadline. I don't know what Jonathan, he has nothing to do but play. And so that's why if you're the Colts, you have, even though this is an ugly situation, one of the best players on your team should not be treated like this, and I think is deserving of a contract extension. Taylor has no choice but to play. And I think bare minimum the next 2 years, he'll be a Colt because he literally can't do anything else.
That's why I don't see how this all resolves, because he is stuck into a corner. But it's not going to be good for the Colts either if you've got Taylor out there and his mindset's not in a good place, which I can't understand how it would be because of the way the situation is right now. And to me, it's closer to what's going on with Josh Jacobs and the Raiders than it is the Barkley situation. Because, with the Barkley situation, they kind of understand it's highly unlikely Barkley's going to get tagged again next year. I know that they didn't put any language like that into the contract, but they went through this whole thing. I think they both feel like, they're happy that it found a way to a point where he's okay with the situation and they're okay with the situation. They're going to be able to play it out this year. I think both sides are probably thinking they're going to move on next year. Barkley will be a free agent and the Giants probably draft somebody. And the Colts have to do that for 2 years. I think that's the tough thing. I think that's why Taylor's doing this now, because as little leverage as he has, if it's 0.1% of leverage, it's more today than it's going to be this time next year, when you're on the tag and you're in that situation. So he's trying to avoid that franchise tag. I think that's pretty obvious. And he's trying to get the long-term deal done. And the Colts seem, at least right now, completely dug in against that idea. That's why I just don't have any idea, just like with the Raiders and Jacobs. I don't know how that thing's going to end. That one seems more likely that he'll just sign the franchise tag at some point, whether that's the day before the season or whether it's 3 weeks into the season, or I forget how long you can sit out, before that becomes permanent. But I don't know if Taylor does the same thing. Does he try to just go as far into the season as he can before he officially comes off PUP. And, obviously if he goes on PUP to start the year, then that's what, 6 games, I think, that automatically. So there's leverage on his part there a little bit, in the sense that, hey, how far do you want to push that? And it's just, to me, none of it makes sense. This is your best offensive player. There's no question about that. Everybody agrees that Jonathan Taylor is the best offensive player on this team. And even if you're out there now and you're of the stance of, running backs don't deserve big contracts and they're fungible and you move on and all of these things, I can't see a world in which this is a better team without Jonathan Taylor than it is with him. I don't see how you can make that case. And yeah, you can draft somebody next year, but you still got to get through this year. I don't understand why there's such a, I mean, I get it, because the NFL is a cold hard business, and that's the way, ultimately that's the way everything comes down to. But to me, if I'm the team, I'm opening negotiations. I'm trying to find if we can at least get a conversation going so that Jonathan Taylor feels like there's something at the end of the rainbow here. It feels like right now, at least from that conversation we had with Jim Irsay, that the selling point from the Colts right now is come out here and play as hard as you can, because we've got a lot of work and a lot of evaluation to do to figure out who the core guys are who are eventually going to get us back to a division title, contending kind of team, and do all of this with the promise of nothing in the future. I just, that's a hard sell to me.
Yes, a few things. Number one, I just looked it up because I thought it changed, and it did. PUP is 4 games now. I think there's a new CBA change. So he's on PUP. He's bare minimum out the first month. Just wanted to clarify that.
No, that's good.
Number two, this is why it's so frustrating, George. You're right. Everything this season needs to be viewed through the lens and the eyes of how can we make Anthony Richardson better? How can we make his development as easy as possible? You just said it. We've talked about this on the pod a million times. It's his life and his game is going to be a million times better with Jonathan Taylor on the field versus him off the field. The Colts do not have another established, truly bona fide playmaker on the offense. I think Michael Pittman still has more to show you. Outside of Jonathan Taylor, there's now one person I truly trust on this offense to get the most out of Richardson outside of number 28. And that's why if you're Jim Irsay and really Chris Ballard as well, I just don't – let me ask you, George. I don't see the difference between Shaq Leonard, Quentin Nelson, Kenny Moore, Nyheim Hines, Ryan Kelly, Braden Smith, all guys that got contract extensions before their deals were up, why Jonathan Taylor is different from that group. And the one thing people could say is, well, Ryan, he plays a valued position, running back. Let me ask you this, George. Let me throw this out there. Is linebacker right now in today's NFL truly a premium position? Is left guard in today's NFL truly a premium position? I would argue no. And so you have no problem paying great players at, let's say, not the top of the heap in terms of positional value. I thought they should have paid Shaq, and they did. I have no problem paying Q, and they did. I look at Jonathan Taylor the same way. He's a great football player. You pay great football players no matter what the position they are. And why, if you're Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay, you know Richardson's going to be better with Jonathan Taylor on the field. Why you're playing hardball, or why you're even risking, and maybe almost in a way, George, pushing and kind of almost taunting Jonathan Taylor to sit out and do something crazy and hurt Anthony Richardson on the field. Why they're even flirting with that idea makes no sense to me. Oh, by the way, one more thing, George. When you have almost $20 million in cap space, 6th most in the NFL, it's not like they have no money and they can just say, hey, JT, look, I'm sorry, we got nothing there. Next year will be better, and we'll try next year. You have plenty of money to spend, very few players on big contracts, a quarterback that's starting year one on a rookie deal, and a history, and not only paying players you drafted early, but paying players you drafted early that don't play the premium positions. Make it make sense, George. Can you try to make it make sense for me?
There really is nothing that makes it make sense other than, just looking at the history with Jim Irsay at the running back position. They've just never really gone and given these guys those second deals. I mean, you go back through Marshall Faulk, got traded to the Rams. Edgerrin James was allowed to walk after, I think, one franchise tag season. Uh, Even Joseph Adai, who did get a contract, got cut during that 2011 cut down. So, it's just Eric Dickerson did not, stick around past his contract when they got the trade. So that's just been historically where they've been.
Can I
Yeah,
interrupt you really fast, George? Shouldn't that change the way they think, though? I get it. Again, running back is not valued in today's NFL, but Marshall Faulk and Eric Dickerson,
yeah.
two great running backs. Shouldn't that almost be? And Jim Irsay's seen both on the team and out the door. Shouldn't that serve almost like as a way to warn you against repeating history?
You would think, and even Edge, I mean, he was never the guy that he was with the Colts, but he had a couple good years again, in Arizona in particular, that could have helped this team, but it's just been their stance. I don't know if it's a organizational plan. It just, no one's really explained that one. That's where actions speak louder than words to me. And you can just look back at the history of that and see that that's where it's been. I don't think anyone is calling for, a 5 to 10 year deal here. I mean, we understand where the running back is. The thing that I don't understand is why you can't, put together a 3-year extension that would kick in next year, and give him a signing bonus that gives him more money up front now, and lock him in with your quarterback during the quarterback's rookie contract, and let him, develop. And then you could revisit this, at age 27 when there's more talks. It's baffling to me that they've taken this hard a stance. I think that's the surprising thing. They've got leverage, and I think it was always something that they were going to use. I mean, why would you not? But it's baffling to me that they've done it in such a hard line kind of a way, where you're, basically telling Jonathan Taylor, we know there's nothing you can do about this. So, you're stuck here next year on this contract and the franchise tag, and just find a way to be happy about that. I don't understand that. As you said, it's not something they've done with Shaq Leonard. Now, I think the difference with Leonard and Nelson, while they're not at premium positions, you still thinking those guys were going to be on, 5+ year deals. They're going to be here and be Colts for a long time. I think another complicating factor about all this, even as a guy who thinks that they should re-sign Jonathan Taylor, who, sees the obvious that this is the best offensive player on the team, the best offensive weapon they've had since Andrew Luck. What are the odds that he is on the next division championship team anyway? Even if you extend him now, like that's part of the issue, is that, I don't know how far the rebuild still has to go, but the running back shelf life is not great in this league. And that's another complicating factor in here. Even if he is on, 1 or even 2 division title teams with Anthony Richardson, is he part of, a deep playoff run? Is he part of, I guess, for lack of a better term, the return to glory of this franchise? You can make the case that Nelson and Leonard would be, that their careers would stretch long enough for that to happen. Taylor, probably not. I think there's just, everywhere you turn, there's something else that complicates this whole situation further.
That's a great point. Let's end here, George. It's a little bit of an express pod today. We'll dive a little bit more into this on Monday's pod as well. But I think it's a good point, because this is how at least I view it. I want to hear your thoughts. I think you're right, where like if you look at the Colts and you say, look, when they kind of hit their peak and when they start winning division titles and becoming legitimate Super Bowl contenders, will Jonathan Taylor be a main part of the offense? I would argue no. Right? They're not going to win the division this year. They're not going to win the division next year. So it's like bare minimum, we're talking about 3 years from now, Richardson kind of evolving where they could be legitimate division contenders. So maybe they get 1 division title with Jonathan Taylor as a either main or top contributor on this offense. I would still argue, though, George, giving him extension now makes still sense, a lot of sense, even if you're not going to win playoff games and go to the playoffs a ton. I think for me, how I view it is this. Jonathan Taylor, again, is going to make Anthony Richardson's life easier. So especially in a rookie year, if he's able to take pressure off Richardson, allow him to develop and get comfortable because you have an all-pro back next to you, and make your, make your development easier, where you can kind of maybe hit the ground running faster than you would if there's no weapons around you or no one that truly scares the defense around you, now all of a sudden you can hopefully expedite his development, maybe make him a better quarterback faster. And then by the time he's up for an extension, Richardson that is, and maybe by the time the Colts are truly ready to contend, maybe Jonathan Taylor is like kind of on the last year of a deal on his last leg. That's fine. Like for me, the Jonathan Taylor contract extension now is truly and only about making Anthony Richardson a better quarterback and let's say the next 3 years. Right up until the time that we've seen now, quarterbacks truly get big time deals. Justin Herbert, I think Joe Burrow is going to get one as well this year. After year 3, that first window where you can extend a quarterback, we're seeing a lot of guys get that. If I'm Chris Ballard, if I'm Jim Irsay, I'm looking at it as I want to extend JT now. I have plenty of cap space. So that way, if I have to extend, and hopefully I can extend Anthony Richardson in 3 years from now, I'm hoping a large part of that extension is because of 28's help in making Richardson a better quarterback. So even though I think you're right in the sense that if they, let's just say they win 7 division titles, I know it's crazy to say, but just picking a big number, and let's say 6 out of the 7 division titles they win are either with Jonathan Taylor as a mid-level contributor or not on the team. I still think if he's on the team now, you extend him now, and he makes Richardson a better quarterback over these next 3 years, that contract extension to me is worth it. Absolutely worth it, even if it doesn't result in division titles or playoff wins. Do you look at that similarly? Like, I guess if you're the Colts, do you understand they're thinking of, well, we're not very good right now, and so we're not going to give you an extension? Or do you look at it more as like, even if they don't win now, he makes Richardson a better QB, it's still worth it?
Well, I absolutely think you need him here to help Anthony Richardson develop, to help the wide receivers develop, to help the offensive line develop. I mean, you've got a great player in your backfield, and I think you want to do everything in your power to keep him here and to get, all the prime years out of him. But that's obviously not the thought process right now. And, and it could change. That's the other thing is something's going to have to budge here sooner or later. Either Irsay's going to have to change his mindset that they're not going to trade him, or they're going to have to, legitimately come to the table. And who knows? I think the best thing Taylor could do right now, because he has no leverage, is come out and have, a September where he's the AFC player of the month and force the issue. Remind everybody he's the best running back in the NFL and show them all the value that he has to the team.
And we saw Grover Stewart, I believe the most recent example in 2020, getting a contract extension in season. So maybe that's what, you talked about it as well before, what does JT need to prove to get a contract extension? You say be healthy and get off to a good start. He has 500 yards, let's say, in September. Maybe all of a sudden Irsay looks at it differently. Maybe Ballard looks at it differently. So you can kind of dangle that carrot if you're the Colts of, hey, you come in motivated, you play well. All of a sudden, mid-October, things could drastically change compared to where they are right now on July 30th. So I hope, George, something changes. This situation has honestly divulged in a way that I have, or I should say digress. It has really kind of veered. I'm going to use a third adjective. I'm sorry. It's Saturday. It's Sunday morning. My head is still spinning with this news, but maybe this conversation veers in 2 months from now differently than the way we're talking about it right now. But George, holy smokes. This is, again, we got the counter here. 0 days since the last Colts drama that has been brewing. We are staying busy here. A nice Saturday night practice. I was supposed to be on Anthony Richardson and seeing how he develops. A little prime time, sold out practice underneath a beautiful Indiana sunset was instead spoiled by drama. I think unnecessary drama, mostly thanks to Jim Irsay. And what else, George? His comments. So we'll continue to break this down. I want to talk a lot on Monday's pod about what happens next for the Colts. When can we expect Jonathan Taylor to be back on the field, if at all, in training camp? And if the Colts do trade him, what can you possibly expect back in a trade package? What could the Colts be looking for to make that deal worth it? So still a lot to break down. Also, by the way, we got practice to still talk about as well. So it's a very busy season right now, Blue Horseshoe podcasting. First
on Monday. So, yep.
I forgot. You're right about that. First padded practice on Monday. Holy cow. And everything's being overshadowed by right now stuff off the field, which guess what, George? Sounds a lot like 2019. Sounds a lot like 2021, where the off the field drama is bigger than the on the field drama. sometimes time is truly just a flat circle. And here we are back like we have never left from the drama. That is for sure. So we will be back on Monday. Make sure you check us out wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Pod. Try to enjoy your Sunday. I mean, George, especially for you, this is supposed to be an off day, right? I hope nothing crazier happens here, but try to enjoy your Sunday, Colts fans, and not think about right now the best player in offense possibly wanting his way out. And we'll talk to you on Monday morning right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.